Walt, it's Waymo and Tesla week here on Autonomy Markets. You know why? Simple. Americans are falling in love with autonomous vehicles despite the propaganda the AAA puts in the market. We have quantitative data from Alphabet and the California Public Utilities Commission and qualitative data from San Francisco Standard. Walt, I'm very proud to announce journalism is alive and well.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, and I'm very interested because I do not subscribe to the San Francisco Standard, your former hometown paper, to hear that stuff. But to be honest, Grayson, I'm more of a data guy. So what kind of qualitative evidence do you have for me this week in terms of what's going on in autonomy?
First off, never lived in San Francisco. Thought about it, never did it. So there for the record, because somebody's going to data check this thing, because we got fact checkers now. You know who you are because you call me with detailed notes, fact checking. So for the fact checkers that know me, you know I didn't live there.
You lived in California, though, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Lived in Southern California, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine.
Big difference. Big difference.
Yeah, especially when people in California. I like them both. I like the Valley. I like San Francisco. I especially like the wine country. And I love and have a lot of good friends down in Los Angeles. But we digress. What's the data?
We digress. I will say this. One of the best underrated wines in the Valley, Maybach. Chris Maybach makes a great wine. Really good wine. There's a plug for Mr. Maybach. On to the data, because we can have wine after this, or maybe we have wine in Autonomy Markets. But today, I'm getting on to the data. So Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet and Google, he put out a tweet today in which he posted Waymo's now conducting 200,000 plus paid trips each week across LA, Phoenix, and San Francisco. Walt, that's a 20x growth in less than a year, because the last data point we had was 150,000 rides in the Q4 2024 earnings call. Wow, oh wow, Waymo's growing up.
Yeah, I mean, these data points are interesting. I wonder if it's in part kind of a response to a lot of the noise, which we'll get to later, coming out of the Tesla camp with developments both in China and also in California. Is there like a pressure for these executives to go out with data points? Be that as it may, still good numbers on their part and just showing how this is quickly scaling. I think there was yet another picture, another drone flying over and seeing all those Jaguars. I think it was like 2,000 cars, so whatever, like Google's excited. And obviously the tweet coming from Sundar, I think, speaks for itself in terms of the importance of that company, as it was from the beginning. I mean, this whole program obviously originated from the top, so there's still dedication there.
A lot of dedication, and we also further had data from the California Public Utilities Commission for the September to December 2024 time period. I want to put this into the record. The average weekly rides were 122,000. That's a 50% increase in less than 6 months. 50% increase. That's a heck of an increase. Imagine if it was a stock, it'd be going to the moon. Total Waymo vehicles used. Here's the interesting thing. 730 vehicles used. The average is 23.8 rides per day per vehicle for the month of December 2024. Really good data points.
Well, that was definitely good data. So thank you for this CPUC. Not always a huge fan of them, and based on stuff I did deal with them in telecom world, but 50% increase is big in terms of the weekly rides. The number that's still curious to me is that 730 for Waymo vehicles in California. I mean, that's servicing, let's call it 1,000 just to make it easy. That's servicing LA and San Francisco. And, that represents, each of those markets are about 1 million people each. So let's say Waymo is doing 2 million, let's call it 3 million. So Waymo is in areas that are, where people work and live. Let's say it's about 3 million with 1,000. What's the equivalent that Uber has? Well, Uber, in all of California has 200,000 drivers, and that's a population of 40 million. But let's cut that back because 5 million are rural and maybe 5 million are just not addressed, and say it's 30 million. So 200,000 drivers for 30 million, which, by the way, is, one car for about every 150 people. That's much less than what industry pundits like Larry Burns, who wrote the book on autonomy, thought it would be required to provide this level of service. But I digress. If you're doing 30 million with 200,000 drivers, you can probably do a population of 3 million with 20,000. Again, 30 million, Uber needs 200,000 drivers. They can probably service 3 million with 20,000 drivers. And today, Waymo is servicing 3 million with 1,000 drivers. 1,000 versus 20. Yes. Come at me. Give me data that I don't have. Yes, I get that, the number of rides that are on Waymo are a lot less and the locations are different and, a lot of factors, who knows what the wait times are in the peak hours, things that we want to get data on. But that's a huge differential. And I'm wondering, since clearly the early estimates on what you need number of drivers to service a market has probably been overstated, maybe the need for Waymo is not to get to the same volume of cars that Uber and Lyft are trying to use today. Is that possible?
Yes, because what Waymo has, which Uber doesn't, is a constrained ODD. It doesn't go everywhere. You look at LA, it doesn't go north of Sunset, it doesn't go to the valley. And here's an interesting statistic that I want to highlight here. 23.8 rides per day per vehicle. That's basically one ride per hour per day. Could that potentially get to every 30 minutes? And then all suddenly then they're doing 48 rides per vehicle? Because that's an efficiency that Uber can't match because, as I said, Waymo has that very condensed ODD versus you get an Uber in LA. Hi, take me to San Diego. Let the driver's got to go, or take me to Vegas. The Waymo's not going to do that. So it's a lot more efficient operation.
I just think also as a robot, you're going to be more efficient. I'm getting rides canceled on me a lot because of probably the location where I'm going. There's Uber drivers that are waiting in airport parking lots. I mean, there's a lot of things that might make those numbers higher than they really need to be. And this factors into when people are doing the numbers on what are the capital investment that you need to get a return, aside from the fact that the cost of that car and the equipment is going to come down dramatically. Now I'm saying that the number of cars that you need to service the market, may not be, I think, as great as people expect. Again, this is stuff we need to do more research on, but I just see what Waymo is doing in the market today, what the wait times are like, what the quality of service is like. And it's, again, 1,000 versus 20,000 on an equivalent basis. Even if you assume that one robot equates to 3 different shifts of Uber drivers, it's clearly going to be higher than that because of all of these incremental efficiencies that you have as a robot and how they operate and how you're going to construct that, that model. I mean, it could be that these models that everyone glorifies that Uber and Lyft have, which, matches the supply and the demand, and this is so complex, is because they're overmatching the supply to have a bunch of latent drivers sitting there in order to get those wait times at 5 minutes. So they're going to need, by definition, that many more drivers because you can't rely on the human as much as the robot where you're specifically going to strategically put that asset in the right place. So it'll be fascinating to see as they continue to scale, what is that equivalency that they actually need in terms of number of cars relative to what Uber and Lyft has had to achieve.
Waymo becomes an efficient business. And here would be something interesting. When Waymo puts 1,000 vehicles in Los Angeles and 1,000 vehicles in San Francisco, what does that do to the wait times? What does that do to demand? And then at that point, based on your math, do we potentially see them chipping away at Uber and Lyft's market penetration?
Yeah, and again, incremental labor costs don't exist. So it also goes back to, does every Waymo car have to be utilized throughout the entire day? Maybe you have excess cars there for those peak times so that the wait times remain reasonable and keep customer loyalty within the apps. But I don't know, it's definitely fascinating data, and I'm glad we, hopefully it wasn't too boring for our listeners this is very simple math. And again, looking forward to any criticisms that our listeners may have in terms of where we may have miscalculated. But why don't we move on to the qualitative side, because there was some news on that as well from the San Fran Standard.
Yes. Waymo has groupies. They have fans, loyal fans, almost fanatical like Star Wars fans. The San Francisco Standard interviewed a series of Waymo power users, power riders, and there was one individual that the San Francisco Standard interviewed. This gentleman has taken 686 Waymo rides since November 2023 for a grand total spend of $14,000, averaging out to $933 a month spent on Waymos. This is platinum level stuff. With that type of demand, could we see Waymo introduce an airline-like loyalty program to further spur that demand?
Yes, 100%. That is part of a process to, as you kind of roll out growth in the future. At the moment, I think the demand is there just because people are looking for, a safe ride and a clean ride and things like that. But I mean, to answer your question specifically, Grayson, I mean, just look at Uber One. They have, I think, more than 25 million subscribers. Look at, what telcos have done, as I've talked about in past podcasts, for streamers, Disney, whatever, to get people locked in for loyalty programs. So that makes a lot of sense. And look, you already have kind of power users, what we call these platinum level users that are out there. So 100% they should do that.
And they're sticky users, and they will continue to spend money, and then they become your greatest marketing advocates. And look, reading into the interview, it really stood out to me. One of the overarching driving factors for the loyalty to Waymo was safety. This individual said that he's been in Uber and Lyfts with drunk drivers that are tired and distracted, and he feels safer in the robot vehicle. That's a very big step.
Yeah, I mean, and I think hopefully that will get recognized more and more. And I think that is just part of the industry trying to, like, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like this week, I saw a quote from someone at Ford talking about how though they didn't want to do level 4 in these lower end cars, level 2 or level 3. And what struck me is kind of the almost arrogance about it. Like, oh, we don't want to invest in this technology that can hopefully save lives. And imagine, insert airbag in there for whatever his comments were about not wanting to do level 4 or any type of advanced technology, when there's certainly plenty of evidence about how this saves lives. So it's just a disconnect, I think, still, with Detroit and the auto industry, which is opening the doors for disruption, whether it's Waymo, Tesla, or the variety of technology companies that we continue to learn more about, and that can, maybe partner with some of the forward-thinking auto companies of the future.
That quote was from none other than Mr. Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford. You're right. There is a massive disconnect between Detroit and what the consumer wants. The consumer wants a consistent, reliable product. The consumer wants autonomy. And on the consistency front, there's a quote from this article. This individual said, "I like the consistency of the vehicle. It's always clean. It's nice and comfortable, and it's always going to be the same, very similar to a Four Seasons or a Ritz." I added that. Now back to the quote. "There must be something psychological there, like this is my transport bubble." Consistency is the name of the game, and I've said this for years. Uber's Achilles heel with X is the inconsistency of the product. I can't tell you how many times I've been there in cities around the world, and an individual smoking a cigarette, and I don't smoke cigarettes. And lo and behold, I tell him to put him out, and he has a cow. This is my car. Get the F-bomb out of here. Not a consistent product.
Grayson, we are so aligned on this. This has been a topic we've talked about on many episodes, and it's a reason that I think they should be able to charge a premium for, because you're getting in that car, it's driving the same way, it's clean if they're integrated to the right fleet management company, and it's safe. But it's that consistency. McDonald's probably not the best example, because it's maybe not perceived as high quality, but at least when you go into a McDonald's anywhere in the world, that Big Mac is pretty much going to be exactly what you expect it to be. Four Seasons, probably a better analogy to this, but consistency and quality of product is, I think, a key driver of customer satisfaction, and increasingly an Achilles heel for the rideshare companies. They just sent Waymo and Tesla, going on their own. On the flip side of that, like, look, if it goes the opposite way, these fleets that they're building up can plug in as the high quality, consistent option of the driver. Like right now, I'm getting very frustrated. Not a huge fan of how the Tesla drives. I find it very uncomfortable. That shouldn't be in the black car category for Uber. It just shouldn't, in my opinion. It's just not a comfortable ride. Maybe the new Y will be a more comfortable ride, but if you have fleets and you increase the categories, maybe they can do a better job to, push off what is now a risk, right? Cited now in this San Francisco standard as a reason why people like Waymo, that consistency of quality that they're getting for those Waymo rides.
Waymo, very similar to Four Seasons, is a premium product. And if you read Mr. Isidore Sharp, the founder of Four Seasons book, he talks about a consistent product, whether you're in New York or you're in London, you have to have the same bed. It's the consistent product, which allows them to charge a premium. When do we get to a point in the market where Waymo is able to charge a premium because it's a consistent, reliable, comfortable product?
I think the way it should work, and for all we know, they're doing this, you have enough markets, you start testing stuff in different markets, you jack price a little bit over here and see, what the impact is, if anything, on the demand. It might be a little hard because people might be seeking out this product right now because it's of its quality, of its novelty. Let's be honest, still novel for a lot of people taking those rides, and for it's just overall quality. So it might be hard, but over time, these are things that you can just test in the market.
Look at quality, you look at consistency. Tesla, because when Elon launches his Robotaxi network, it's only going to be Tesla vehicles. And Mr. Musk was in the news this week for the Doge father. He was there at the cabinet meeting. But then on the Tesla FSD side, they announced that FSD is now available in China.
Yeah, I did see the China stuff, Grayson, and that obviously set off the Twitter Tesla universe all abuzz. Definitely more interested in kind of the California applications, which we'll get to next. But as you know, I spent some time on WeRide and Pony, and I definitely have a healthy skepticism about what exactly is going on in China and what are the requirements and not requirements. So I prefer to focus our podcast on autonomy in America. But congrats to Tesla, and we'll monitor it to the best we can, remotely for what's going on in China. But let's move on to California, because I think there's definitely much more interesting news occurring right here in the U.S. with Tesla.
You're right about China because we can't get transparency. And we really don't know what the data is. And so you're right. We'll touch on it from time to time, Marcus, but we're not going to dive into it. Bloomberg this week came out with a banger. They were reporting that Tesla applied for a transportation charter party carrier permit from the California Public Utilities Commission. Same permit that Waymo has. But I want to highlight the interesting part of this permit. The vehicles have to be operated in a fleet. They cannot be owned by an individual. What do you think is going on there?
I mean, that's interesting. But why do you think that is the case in terms of the fleet requirement?
California is the home of overregulation.
So it's just easier to go after a small business owner that's trying to get a fleet off the ground than it would be to go after individual people in terms of control. That's your take?
It 100% boils down to control. California's done a horrendous job, actually a horrible job, of regulating autonomous vehicles. They're putting policies and politics above the safety of California residents. They're putting politics above the health of the California economy. And as we all know, the California economy is in trouble. It's so bad, Newsom even launched his own podcast to talk directly to the people of California.
So let's take this a different direction. Grayson, does this mean for your Austin prediction for Tesla was incorrect? Were you predicting that Austin, on a limited basis, would be where Tesla would first launch this autopilot in June? I mean, I don't even know if California, that might still be good, because if you're just starting an application with California now, maybe you'll see them in 3 years when they'll get some approval. And in fairness to you, you did say that if it were not in Austin, anywhere else, there would be a safety driver. And I think that was part of this Bloomberg article, an additional wrinkle, not just the individual owners, but that they'd have to have a safety driver as well. Is that true, or did I misread that?
Bloomberg reported that, and the Washington Post reported that. So we have two outlets. I'm not saying either are credible, but we have two outlets that have reported that, and it did not come from the editorial desk either. So if that is indeed true, that Tesla is going to launch in California with a safety driver, and let's call a spade here, they're going to have to do it because of the onerous regulatory environment in California. How does the market react? Do they say, oh, here's the Elon hype machine getting deflated? How does the market react?
I mean, I guess you probably might have seen some of the reaction today. Uber was down 2%. Lyft was up. So maybe the market's not giving us a true reaction to Tesla in California. Maybe people are looking at this and saying it's still California. It's an application. And again, see you in 3 years. I mean, you're a bit of an expert in that area. How long do you think it'll take for this California application to result in something for Tesla to be able to operate there?
I'm going to be polite. I'm going to be realistic. If you're lucky, 12 months. If you're lucky. And going through a CUPC hearing is not going to be easy, because Mr. Musk is universally disliked by the residents and politicians in the state of California. That's going to make it tricky. And I sit here, I understand the market opportunity. I understand the market size. But I ask myself, why go into California before you truly have proven the technology works and that it's scalable, reliable, and safe?
I mean, maybe it's Elon looking for the troll of having them say no so we can then rail against them. And the other thing, in terms of reactions, I mean, I think you've seen some of the reactions, perhaps to the Tesla stuff in China, as well as maybe this California. I mean, Sundar from Google made the announcement today with that data. Maybe that's just the reaction to, like, being out there and visible with what's going on with them. Maybe this is driving, Waymo into Lyft's arms. They see all this stuff happening with Tesla, and they got to get something done with Lyft, which is what may be driving Lyft stock up. It's I still don't quite get the Lyft thing. I mean, I think they just stopped Phoenix like late last year. I mean, that relation, that they started with Lyft in Phoenix, and then that kind of ended, but now we're hoping that a new market launches. So look, another thing that could happen is maybe Waymo accelerates Austin as kind of a pushback to whatever Tesla is cooking up. South by Southwest is coming up soon, March 7th to March 15th. Maybe that's a platform for Google to officially launch Austin and get all those, kind of influential people out there experiencing Waymo at Austin.
What we're seeing, and all signs point to this, there's a competition brewing between Waymo and Tesla. How about that? South by South rolls around on March 7th. Ding, 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 ding. Waymo Uber's here. Perhaps. There's definitely a competition brewing here.
Yeah, I think there was also, Waymo has been sending out emails or text messages, Austin, see you on Uber soon, just to get people on the interest list. So look, maybe that's a part of the reaction to Tesla, or maybe it's not even part of the reaction. Maybe this is just Waymo executing on its strategy, getting its next market out in the mix.
There's no doubt about it that Waymo is clearly the leader. They're clearly executing on their strategy. And you look at strategy, we talk about this a lot, and I say this a lot publicly. You have to give Mr. Kawasaki a lot of credit at Uber. The gentleman continues to tell the autonomy narrative. And at the FAI Investment Summit in Miami, on stage, Mr. Kawasaki said, I reached out to Elon, asked him if he wants to go on the Uber platform. He says, nope, doing it on my own. So it tells me Kawasaki's still hunting for a deal. Who do you think gets the next Uber autonomy deal?
Oh, the next Uber autonomy. I thought you were going to say Tesla, because I think that statement by Dara wasn't really surprising if you listen to what Elon said and just looked at the type of person he is. He's not partnering with anybody. He's not licensing FSD to any car manufacturer. I'm like putting myself up at the risk of getting those freezing cold takes by saying that with such certainty. But like at some point, you just got to look at this and be like, you really think that they will license that out? This is, an Elon show, first and foremost. I don't know who's next for Uber. The more time I spend, in this space, and I look at, some of the technology companies, I'm super impressed by the number of companies that maybe were, people originally at Google or wherever, Uber themselves that now are coming home, professors that are taking technological approaches. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunities out there, and we are optimistic for nearly all of them, and very hopeful that they can all kind of push forward. Obviously, you're going to have very few winners, but I think there is a lot of opportunity for Uber to try and develop other solutions. I think the challenge is going to be perhaps with the manufacturers of cars, and then questioning, like, going through that age-old debate of like, how necessary are they really? And maybe do you go back to the original, Waymo or Google or whatever, I even forget the name of what they call them, chauffeur version of the market. Maybe you just need to design your own car that's super cheap and super basic, rather than even worrying about trying to partner with some of these OEMs. It might be hard for some of these technology companies to do that now, because partnerships are part of capital raise and, fitting into that question on how they're going to get to scale and who the robots are going to be. Or maybe that's your strategy, like Wave is altogether, which is just all you're doing is enabling, the cars, the OEMs to deal with it. But I think if you go back to the origins of Chauffeur and Google, maybe they just have to think about applying this technology to a very cheaply designed car. Maybe a car company has to emerge and say, I'm going to provide that super cheap $15,000, $20,000 platform that you can put your technology in, whoever it is.
That's what the plan from all the public statements has seemed with Seeker. And there are photos that they're ramping up testing in San Francisco, I still think that's the wrong deal. But if, as the Nikkei's been reporting in the Financial Times, if the deal goes through and Foxconn strikes deal with Nissan, you got a contract manufacturer there with proven experience to do that. And then when that happens, that fragments the market, and that gets really, really interesting. Advantage Uber. And when you look at advantages, I think, and I'm going to agree with you, I think you're right when you say Tesla will not license FSD. We probably blew up every analyst report on Wall Street of the Tesla bulls. They equate that for a big chunk of their valuation. Because if I'm Tesla, why do I want to give up a major strategic advantage that will force somebody to buy my car versus a competitor's car because of FSD? Why would I want to give that away?
Yeah, I don't. I just don't think they will. And like, I would also be super positive on that concept. I just don't think that's the way he's going to go. And frankly, I just question more and more whether, like, I just, just to restate what I was saying before, whether it makes more sense for you have purposed designed vehicles, whether it's a third party doing it or the companies themselves.
No matter what happens with Tesla, no matter what happens with Uber or what happens with the market, you're going to need sound policy. And hopefully you're going to get that policy at the federal level. And we've had some really good news at the federal level that continues with this new Trump administration as it relates to autonomous vehicle policy. In a question asked by Senator Todd Young of Indiana as part of Steve Bradbury's confirmation hearing for Deputy Secretary of Transportation, Senator Young wrote the following to Mr. Bradbury, and quote, Mr. Bradbury, I've been a proponent of autonomous vehicles and expanding opportunities for testing and deployment. The United States has been the global leader on AVs, but I am concerned that China is catching up and our country will soon be surpassed if we do not put in place pro-AV policies. And then Senator Young goes on to ask, what are your thoughts on AVs and what opportunities do you see at the Department of Transportation for AV policy? In which, this is important, Mr. Bradbury wrote the following statement, in quote, automated driving technologies, including autonomous vehicle systems, hold great promise to reduce highway deaths and injuries dramatically. I believe the Department of Transportation, DOT, should work to advance regulatory frameworks for the nation that will help facilitate and accommodate the development, testing, and safe deployment of such innovative technologies and systems. If confirmed, I would plan to assist the Secretary in working towards this goal if legislation is needed or deemed appropriate. I would expect to support the Secretary in working with Congress to advance federal policy in this important area. While all signs based on this statement are pointing towards a national autonomous vehicle framework.
I don't even like that last sentence of his statement. I think he just had to throw that in there for whatever reason. But I don't think we should need legislation. And certainly this administration has not shown the need for legislation to move forward on things. So good for him for being kind of, I guess, politically correct in putting that in there in the actual political correct version of politically correct. But, let's get this at the level where you do not need legislation, to move this forward. Again, I just wonder if is Elon testing California to just kind of show the frustration that companies have in dealing with individual states. It's almost like could be like a setup for them. Who knows? But this is obviously good, and I think going to be positive for the industry for sure.
We need a federal framework because Washington State now is trying to ban autonomous vehicles. Colorado's trying to ban autonomous vehicles. New Mexico tried to ban autonomous vehicles. These states with political agendas are trying to push through agendas to ban this technology. So we do need it on the federal level. When we do get a federal framework, which I believe we will we see more investment dollars flow into autonomy since there is regulatory certainty?
You ask this question a lot, and I think certainly it helps. But the more we kind of move forward here, like what is going to enable investment dollars to flow to these companies is delivering driver out customer relationships and paying customers and being driver out. The technology. In short, I'm being too specific. Get the technology to work. I think you have a government at the federal level, at least, that's going to support you. It is disturbing when you tell me about these individual states that are trying to do these things. It's not new. I mean, this happens in many different, areas. But we have a federal government, I think, that, hopefully will drive forward. Again, I always bring up there are labor interests that could fight against this, that also have a, an ability and some influence with the president. So hopefully that doesn't derail some of these efforts. And I certainly don't hope or think that legislation should be required in order to kind of move this forward.
On the technology working, how important is it, milestone, with Aurora going driver out by the end of April on public roads with an 80,000 pound truck hauling goods that have been paid for by a customer?
I mean, I think that's super important, especially since it's coming from a company that historically their culture is not known for pushing the envelope in terms of putting safety first, making sure the products work first before putting them out on the road, and that should not be left unstated. But I think it's important for everyone to kind of get their product moving, and there's a lot of companies out there that are maybe they're not April, maybe it might not even be 2025, and there's 2026. It's not the end of the world if you can't get your product on the road in 2025, depending on where your financing is. You also, by the way, just to point this out, you have a lot of people that kind of come out of the same coaching tree, let's call it. There is an opportunity for new blood, I think, to rethink the approach, just from a 10,000 foot level. No disrespect to people that have spent the last 20, 30 years working in this area. There's, tremendous amount, as an old guy myself, tremendous amount of value in that. But I think we can't, especially with AI, compute, NVIDIA's role in this space, I think don't underestimate those that aren't part of that, haven't been a part of that family tree, and their ability to quickly develop technology and products that may not be driver out in 2025, but still could have a big impact on the market. And by the way, those are companies that Uber and Lyft should be seeking out and trying to, help as much as they can.
You're right. AI is going to accelerate the development of autonomy. We don't even know where that acceleration is coming from or what those companies could be, but we do know we're going into a very exciting time in autonomy. When you look at exciting times, we have exciting times in the markets, and then you just got flat out propaganda and absolute bull donkey dust, which brings me to the section that you coined, the unforced error. AAA, sorry, Greg, you continue to put out misleading data about autonomous vehicles. You've done it for years. I've talked to you privately about this, and now I'm putting you on blast. This week, AAA released their annual driver attitudes towards self-driving vehicles report this week. AAA reported only 13% of U.S. drivers would trust riding in an autonomous vehicle. It's an increase from 9% year over year. Despite this increase, 6 in 10 U.S. drivers report still being afraid to ride in an autonomous vehicle. It's flat out false. It's B, enter in the thing, close it with a T, exclamation, bold it. That's what it is. So how do I get there? I have a lot of data scientist friends, and we dove into this. So we look at the methodology here. And I'm going to quote this method. The survey was conducted January 9th through 13, 2025, using a probability-based panel designed to be representative of the U.S. household population. Okay? And they did a total of 1,095 interviews, those 18 or older. You failed. You failed. The data's incorrect. Years ago, I participated in the SAE demo days. What we did was we hired a real data firm, not a propaganda firm. And we surveyed individual riders before and after the ride when they went in an autonomous vehicle. That's how you do the survey. You don't put out misleading nonsense because it causes headaches and heartburns in the market. That's the unforced error of the week. What's your take on it, Walt?
Well, I mean, you are really relishing this segment of the podcast, the unforced error of the week. So I just love that you're bringing that on. I mean, first of all, how many people, when your phone rings or something hits your inbox, you actually listen to a survey or a poll? And don't we have enough evidence of how polls have really not proven to be accurate when things come? But let's put that aside. I don't even think it matters. Like when cars were first brought, into the market, I'm sure people were afraid of them and didn't want to drive them. And like that noisy car that drove by your horse was like very upsetting. Like, who cares? Like, I think to your point, the SAE stuff is even better. Like the delight of someone getting in one of these cars or even the boredom, the opposite side of it. Like when Rich and Brandon got into the Waymo in San Fran, and within 5 minutes, like, oh yeah, this is cool. And then they were, looking at their phone, like taking it for granted. This is just common sense, right? And then the facts will speak for themselves with regard to the safety of this stuff. This is why, getting back to, like, not to change topics on you, but like getting back to rethinking whether OEMs, whether car manufacturers have to play a role. Like having a wheel in these cars ultimately is like, why would you want something that the person that kills people, meaning the human, could grab and do something incorrectly? Ultimately, these have to be, in my opinion, probably vehicles without wheels, so that the human can't make the dumb mistake that leads to the thousands of deaths that we have every year. But again, I took your unforced error of the week and took it on a random path, so apologies for that.
You have to have the wheel because you need to get a NHTSA exemption, so it goes back to outdated...
For now.
Outdated regulations. And going back in history, because I love to go back in history, what Waymo's doing is the modern day vagabonds with Edison, Ford, and Firestone, where they went around in the automobile to build trust. Waymo's going city by city to build trust, despite the absolute propaganda that AAA is spewing on behalf of the auto insurance companies. Jake from State Farm is not a friend of the autonomous vehicle industry. Jake from State Farm is not a friend of anybody, and they should pay to California the money that they owe them. AAA, do a better job. Stop bowing down to special interest, because I'm here and I'm not fed up. I am fed up, actually. And I'm going to continue to do this. And Walt gets me all hyped up, because Walt gives me magic hype up sauce before we go to this segment. You can't see it, but he does. And Walt, with my rant now over, what do we need to look for in the autonomy markets over the next week?
I mean, we've got some big investor conferences next week where Uber, Lyft, and others are going to be speaking. So, you'll probably have some comments addressing all of the stuff that happened this week with Tesla and Waymo. So I'm sure there'll be hopefully more data that's provided and more commentary. And I don't know, maybe we'll get another announcement. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, looking forward to breaking it all down with you. Hopefully we get some good data. We're going to have a lot of commentary and color to our listeners and viewers. Thanks for tuning in each and every week. Thanks for the really great detailed notes you send Walt and I. We really appreciate it. And we'll continue to address your comments each and every week. And thanks again, as always. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is scaling autonomy. Walt, until next week.